Headphone highlights. Hello and welcome back. Today is gonna be interesting because we're talking about a very beloved brand and everyone over here amongst us really loves. They make amazing, amazing stuff. Talking about Koss. Right there. Koss. There's the brand name right there. There you go. Yes. We're talking about Koss once again. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, you might notice that things might look a little bit different. I hope you enjoy it. New lenses. It's cool. So yes, Koss. This is the Koss UR-40. And it looks a little different from some other stuff that Koss is known for. And it really is different than the kind of stuff that Koss is known for. This is an over-ear headphone rather than an on-ear. Every single Koss product that we have talked about here on the channel has been an on-ear solution or some variety of it. This is the first Koss over-ear headphone we have seen. I have not heard anything about this headphone. I saw it on Amazon and I was curious because Koss, when it comes to their over-ears, has kind of a mixed reputation. I know that might sound a little strange because we're talking about Koss here, and Koss is notorious for crazy good price to performance headphones, huge quality for little money. And this was, again, a very cheap headphone. This is a $20 headphone. But how does it compare to the kind of stuff that Koss is known for? Your KPH-40s, your 30Is, your Porta Pros. Well, we'll get there. But first, let's talk about this build because the build's quite interesting. And again, very, very different from what we've seen from Koss before. Big over-ear design. So we actually have some headphone strap and headband and swivel stuff and all sorts of typical headphone stuff. Getting everything tangled up here. So up in the front here, this is all plastic. This should be a surprise to nobody. This is kind of a nice silver chrome colored painted plastic here. You got your UR-40 down there and Koss right up here at the top of the yoke. The yoke does allow for the headphone to flip all the way around like so, and you get really no motion forward and back without kind of stretching the headband. But you do get up and down, an almost infinite amount of adjustability up and down. And these yokes are actually also on their own hinges right here. So they can actually fold in on themselves to allow the headphone to kind of tuck in and be portable. I'm using quotation marks for that because this is still a little bulky. But hey, it folds in and that's neat. The height adjustment mechanism for the headband is a clicking system. You just have this kind of plastic bar right here, and it just clicks in and out like that. It's not the most adjustable thing, unfortunately. I have to have this at its absolute maximum amount of heightness for it to fit my head. But once it is set to the absolute limit, it works. It's fine. But just know that if you have a head larger than mine, you might have a bit of a hard time with these. Going up into the headband itself is just a nice, well, it's just a big, thick hunk of hard plastic, which is split down the middle to allow the headphone to, again, collapse in on itself like so. So it does bend right there in the middle. But what is interesting is it does come with a comfort strap. And this comfort strap might, at a glance, from like maybe back here-ish, you might be looking at this and think that comfort strap and general shape of the headband looks very similar to those Apple headphones. Hey, thank you so much for the subscription, Ryan. Thank you. So yeah, it looks very similar to the Apple headphones. It is very different though. The Apple headphone head strap, the comfort strap on the Apple headphone is kind of a stretchy material. It's elastic. This is not. What this is just a mesh. This is just like a fabric mesh. It's not stretchy. It's just kind of there. And while, you know, it might look a little similar, understand it doesn't stretch. It doesn't mold to your head. But it does do the job. It's actually a pretty decent little comfort strap. It's a little flimsy feeling. I think of everything on the build, the thing I would probably expect to fail first would probably be this comfort strap, just because of how kind of, I don't know, findly it feels, but it's pretty nice and it's actually quite comfortable. We'll talk more about that when we get to comfort. Permanently attached cables, as is the standard for Koss, even apparently on their over-ear headphones. And the cable that it is attached to is, I mean, very, very basic. It is just a kind of a tangly mess, basic little rubberized cable. I mean, there's not a whole lot to talk about it. You do have, it terminates into a right angle 3.5mm right there. There you go. Right angle. So that's fine. It's not a very long cable. You're looking at about 4 feet of cable between the headphone and your 3.5mm jack right there. Pop that back in. So the cable's kind of but it's on par with like a Porta Pro cable. It's about the same. The pads. Now, if you, one, are familiar with this headphone, or two, have been looking at this headphone for any reason, you might have noticed that something about my pair is very different from what you've been seeing online or from what you might own if you already own this. And that would be the pads. Yes, these are not the stock pads, because the stock pads are awful. I cannot believe how bad these pads are. They look like little buttholes. Look at this. Look at this. These pads are atrocious. They offer nothing. There's no padding, like, at all. They're hideous. They have that kind of texture. They're terrible. These are absolutely atrociously bad pads. And I could not stand wearing those headphones with these pads, so they immediately came off. And we're fortunate that it was fairly easy to swap another set of pads on here. Currently, I have the Brainwave oval pads put on here, and they fit very, very well, and they work really, really nice. But I will talk a bit more about pads down the road, especially when we get to sound, because I did do quite a bit of pad swapping with these, because this is the first Koss headphone that I have ever owned where I can kind of actually do that. With all those on-ear stuff, you're very limited with what kind of pad mod you can do besides maybe those Grado pads. But with an over-ear, hey, give me an over-ear headphone. I have lots of pads to play around with. There's nothing to them. Yeah, there's nothing to them. It's just a flat nothing that looks like just a gross butthole. They're just the worst. They're absolutely atrocious. They're just like, look at this, just... They're awful. Terrible pads. Okay, so comfort. They're extremely light. Extremely light. The plastic on these is okay. It's not the highest quality plastic, especially pieces like right here on the adjusting mechanism. It's just kind of toy feeling. It's very kind of, I don't know, not very dense plastic. I'm sure it's fine. I don't really feel like it's likely to break unless I really, really do something crazy like throw it at a wall. But it just, you know, it's not the greatest plastic, but it certainly makes the headphone extremely light. So that's very nice, and that helps a lot with the comfort. And again, the comfort strap up here is very, very nice as well. It is a very comfortable comfort strap, while it is a very simple and not particularly luxurious comfort strap, let's say. The pads are terrible and significantly reduce the comfort of the headphone. But with different pads, you're improving your comfort quite a bit. I will say that for the sake of this review, I will talk about the comfort with pads versus without pads. But in general, no weight at all. The comfort strap distributes, it's nice and wide, so it distributes the weight totally evenly, and it does form pretty continuously on my head, so I'm not getting any pressure points on top of the head. The clamp force is really the only thing that's kind of holding the headphone on, but it's not a lot of clamp force. It's totally manageable, totally reasonable. It's not really gripping onto me or crushing my head. And I'm getting nothing in terms of pressure points, especially not on my jawline. That is a little bit due to the fact that the fit is not perfect. Again, because if I can adjust this maybe like one tick more to have the headphone more like here, that would be probably a more ideal fit. But then you would be getting, because right now I have right under here, right under this side of the pad is kind of doing this. Trying to exaggerate it, it's doing this. The top of the pad is very snug on my head, but the bottom of the pad is very loose, and I can even get my finger in there. So that's not ideal because that does, you know, it takes away from the seal from the ear pads, so you're not really sealing your sound very well. Again, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that when we get to sound, but that is something to note. There's no seal down here. There is more seal with the default pads, but again, they're so bad, I wouldn't even count that as a win. In general, very minimal clamp force, very, very light. The headband's super comfortable. These are really quite comfortable headphones. With these default pads, I would rate this maybe a 6 clouds of comfort, according to our cloud comfort scale of comfort. So even with atrociously bad pads, the comfort's pretty decent. But you throw on pretty much any other kind of pad, like for example, these brainwaves, and the comfort jumps quite a bit. But now we're dealing with a 8 clouds of comfort, maybe even 8.5. It's very, very good. I would almost be willing to say I'm on cloud 9 and give these a 9 clouds of comfort. However, I'm not going to do that because these are so bad. If it didn't come with these, if it came with pads like this by default, I probably would say it deserves a 9. But the fact that they come with these terrible things, it takes a whole point away. I just can't deal with that. So, but they're in general very, very comfortable. So the sound. We're already at sound, but that's because there's a lot to say here. Koss is known for making incredibly good performing on a budget headphone. Your KPH-40s are absolutely an incredible buy, and one of the best deals in headphones there is out there. So it's a little surprising to find out that Koss is actually not infallible. Koss makes great, great stuff, but not everything can be a winner. Not everything can be amazing. And unfortunately, Koss kind of has this reputation at this point where they're kind of larger over-ear headphones. They just don't, for whatever reason, they can't get it right. I'm going to talk about these first, how they are right out of the box using these terrible pads, because most people are going to be hearing them that way. And right out of the box, not very good, I'm afraid. They are extremely distorted. There is a decent amount of low end. It's not overly punchy or overly energetic and exciting, but it's enough. The problem is, one of the biggest problems with the sound signature of this headphone is that it's cut off on both ends. The range of frequency that this headphone appears to be capable of is very, very narrow. There's a clear cutoff point both in your bass range and your treble range. I don't know exactly where, but I feel like almost anything that is below maybe 100 hertz doesn't exist, and anything maybe above 15,000 hertz doesn't exist. So it's a huge cutoff point on both ends. You're instead of having extension in your bass range and your treble range, we're getting the opposite. We're getting reduction in both your bass and treble range. So it's very, very narrow in terms of its frequency performance. That's very strange. It's a very strange sound. It sounds like you would expect a $20 headphone to sound from like Walgreens or something like that. That's kind of the sound you're getting out of this. It's a little bit better than that, but not by much. And the bass that is here, while not very low and impactful, is very kind of bloomy and rumbly and quite a bit muddy. Definitely gets into your mid-range. And mid-range is not very detailed. It's kind of muddy. Vocals are rough. Lots of distortion in your vocals. People sound like they're singing to you almost like behind a sheet of aluminum foil. It has almost this robotic tinniness to them, and it sounds very unnatural and not very pleasing. And then the treble range is extremely crunched, so you're not getting hardly any treble detail. It's only really there for like your most tick tick ticks of cymbals and that kind of thing. Otherwise, you're barely getting any treble at all. You don't like to look at these ones. Yeah, I don't either, honestly. And also, and this is interesting because I didn't really notice this so much with a pad swap, but on default with these teeny tiny pads, I am fairly certain, I couldn't repeat it, unfortunately, so I couldn't confirm without a doubt, but I am fairly certain at several points during my testing with these, I heard channel imbalance. Channel imbalance is when, so a headphone should always have the same amount of left and the same amount of right. Like they should be performing at the same level in terms of volume, okay? If you think of a song that is recorded in stereo, you might have like drums only appearing in your left and not appearing in your right. And that's just because of the way it's recorded. But if you were to listen to something in mono, or not in stereo, but switch your audio channel to mono, so it's only playing off of a flat line of sound, then it should be indistinguishable of which side of your ear is loudest, right? It should be left and right should be the exact same volume. So a channel imbalance is when one side sounds more than the other. You're getting more information from one side than the other when it's a mono signal, when it's like flat signal. And unfortunately, there were a couple times while listening to these that I swear I heard channel imbalances. Unfortunately, I couldn't, like I said, I wasn't able to go back and like replicate that very well. It just seemed to kind of happen once in a while, and I couldn't find a way to repeat that or why that was happening. But that was something I noticed. There were some channel imbalances, and that's pretty bad. Not great. So the sound right out of the box is, it's pretty bad. It's not great. I wouldn't recommend it. However, you do get quite a bit of improvement with a pad swap. And that's kind of why I bought these. I didn't have very high expectations for these, but one, I was curious, and two, I was really hoping that you could replace the pads, which apparently you can. And I was extra curious to find out if a pad swap would help it. And it does. For the most part, it does. Right now I have on here these Brainwave oval perforated pads. Let me bring these up so you can take a look. They got a nice big ear volume. You see the perforations in them, or fenestrated, whichever you want to call it. They're nice and thick. They're very, very soft and plush. And just for comparison, here's your default pad. I mean, that's just embarrassing, isn't it? These Brainwave pads obviously improve the comfort tremendously, but they also really do, well, they do improve the sound, but not a whole lot. What they do allow is for you to have significantly better soundstage. They do separate the drivers a bit more from your ears, so you are getting a pretty good amount of soundstage. The soundstage on these is very, very nice. It's not huge, but it's a nice amount. It's a good medium soundstage. With the default pads, not so much. They're pretty freaking narrow. They're almost beaming into your ears kind of narrow. So having some soundstage helps a lot. And it takes away some of that kind of tinny distortion you were getting in the mid-range. So that helps. The low end has elevated a little bit more. And it does hit a little lower. But still, I think that the drivers in these are just kind of incapable of hitting certain ranges. So while it did have this sensation of a bit more extension, I don't think it really was actually extending your frequency response. I think that it was just kind of maybe making it a bit cleaner, not as rumbly, not as bloomy, but the bass sounded a bit better, and your treble range also sounded a little bit more clear. It wasn't really a higher treble. You were getting more treble. It was just a little bit more clear treble, so that you were getting more information than just kind of your most chimmy-cham-chams from your chimes and whatever. These helped a little bit. However, I tried lots of different pads with these. These are some hybrid pads that I honestly, I don't remember where these came from. I think these might have come from a T50 mod I got from Mod House way, way back in the day. But these are a hybrid pad with a solid leather on the outside. The face has a kind of velour finish to them, and on the inside is perforated. These probably sounded the best of all the pads I tried with this headphone. These sounded really, really good. And it was because of how these sounded that I got these perforated brainwaves. Because when I tried to listen to them with something that was a perfectly solid pad, like just a solid protein leather pad, or something like these are these ZMF micro suede pads, which are absolutely magnificent and lovely, but did not help with this headphone at all, I will say. Having a solid pad like this really didn't help. It made everything sound almost a little bit worse, if you can believe it. So don't recommend a solid pad. The hybrid was helping a lot, so I figured maybe a full perforated would help even more. And it's nice, but I still think that these sounded better. Why I'm not using these though is because these just didn't quite fit right. These are just a little bit, I don't know, not the right shape. We're looking at an oval pad here, and these are a little bit rounder, not by much, but they're just in general a little bit bigger, and they just didn't fit as well. So while these did sound the best, they don't fit very well. So it was a hard sell for me. This is kind of another situation like those Brenton headphones, where I got them thinking maybe they would be a sleeper of a headphone, where with the right modifications, the right pad swaps, maybe you can make a really cheap budget headphone sound really, really good. And I can't say this is quite the same situation. I didn't try every possible combination of pad, but I tried very different pads, and they did do different things, but it wasn't a huge difference around the board. And while these did sound, these more like roundy, ovally ones, these hybrid pads, while these did sound the best, it really wasn't that much of an improvement over the bass sound. And it really was even less of an improvement than these brainwaves. It gave you the soundstage that the brainwaves are offering you. And it maybe cleared up your low end a little bit more and brought the mid-range a bit more forward. But the fit just didn't work. The fit was bad. And it just wasn't really worth it. So I don't know. Maybe there's a pad out there for these that's just like the god roll of, the Koss UR-40. Koss with this pad will just end game. Oh my God, it's amazing. I don't know. But from my testing with this, it's just not a very, I don't recommend it. I just don't. It's not a win for me. They're very cheap. They sound very cheap. They're built pretty cheap. I mean, it kind of fits the bill. And that's a little sad because, Koss is known for taking something cheap and making it pretty amazing. They just couldn't really pull it off with this one. But, you can't win them all. And it's good to know that Koss is at least mortal, right? We all make mistakes. And we all learn from our mistakes. Right, Koss? We'll try this again someday, right, Koss? And we'll get it right. Hooray! I'm looking forward to it. But if you're curious, links are in the description. You're welcome to try this out yourself. And if anyone out there gets these and finds a pad match that really, really seals the deal, let me know. I'd love to try it. But anyway, Koss UR-40s, pass. Just pass on them. They're comfortable, but $20 you can get, one of the other Kosses, which are way, way better. So yeah, it's a pass for me. There's that.